In the depths of the Egyptian underworld, the most dangerous weapon was not fire or steel, it was words. When darkness rose to swallow the sun, Thoth didn't reach for a blade. He unrolled a scroll. He didn't slay the monsters, he named them. By defining the chaos, he stripped it of its power, proving the ultimate truth of the cosmos. Whoever controls the language controls the reality. This is the story of Thoth. But before we can grasp the nature of the scribe, we must first survive the none. Do not mistake the none for simple nothingness. To the modern mind, the void is a vacuum, silent and empty. The Egyptians feared something far worse. They understood that true chaos is not an absence, but a terrifying excess. The none was a churning, infinite ocean of raw potential. It was the suffocating darkness before creation where everything existed at once, yet nothing held a shape. A liquid abyss where up and down, light and shadow, life and death were dissolved together in a formless, timeless suspension. Deep within this watery abyss lived the Ogdoad, the 8 primordial deities of Hermopolis. These were not the golden, beautiful gods you see on temple walls. These were monsters of the deep. There were 4 frog-headed gods and 4 snake-headed goddesses, Nu and Nonet, representing the primeval waters, He and Hauhet, representing infinity, Kek and Kauket, representing darkness, Amun and Amaunet, representing the hidden power. The ancient texts tell us something disturbing about the Ogdoad. They were screaming. They were screaming because to exist in the none is to exist in a state of perpetual terror. In a world without time, there is no cause and effect. In a world without light, there is no orientation. In a world without memory, identity is impossible. They were swimming through a churning darkness where nothing made sense because nothing could be remembered from one second to the next. It was a universe of dementia. Order, the Egyptians realized, is not just about structure. Order requires memory, and memory requires a scribe. So, the fundamental question of Egyptian theology is this: how does the God of wisdom arrive in a universe of mindless chaos? How does the first thought occur in a mind that has no language? The answer depends entirely on which story you are brave enough to believe. The Egyptians, in their profound wisdom, were never afraid of contradictory truths. They understood that a god as complex as Thoth could not have a single, simple origin. The first version is the official story, the polished theological version preferred by the high priests of Heliopolis. In this account, Thoth is the Logos. He is the personified intellect of the Creator God. According to this tradition, at the moment of creation, the sun god Ra rose from the waters of the Nun. Ra was all-powerful, burning with life and creative fire, but Ra was raw power. He was the nuclear explosion of creation. He needed a mechanism to direct that power. The myth says that Thoth sprang forth from the forehead of Ra during a moment of profound cosmic thought. He was not born, he was conceived as an idea. He was the moment the Creator God looked at the chaos and thought, I am. Thoth was that thought. He was the structure that allowed the raw energy of the sun to organize itself into a world. He was the living logos of Ra, the articulation of the divine will. If Ra was the heart that conceived the idea, Thoth was the tongue that spoke it into existence. It is a clean, beautiful, and intellectual origin story. It positions Thoth as the divine mind, the cool logic balancing the fiery passion of the sun. But there is another story. There is a darker, older, much stranger myth that whispers from the cracked walls of deeper tombs and the fragments of the pyramid texts. It is a story not of intellectual generation, but of violence, trauma, and the reconciliation of nightmares. This version tells us Thoth was born from the violent, confusing, and sexually charged conflict between Horus and Set. Horus was the falcon god, the lord of the sky, the embodiment of the divine order and rightful kingship. Set was the red beast, the lord of the desert, storms, and chaos. Their war was the central conflict of the Egyptian imagination. It was a war of total opposites: civilization versus barbarism, the fertile black land versus the sterile red sand. During one of the most disturbing episodes of their 80-year war, a violation occurred. Through a complex series of trickery and assault involving tainted lettuce, a symbol of fertility, the seed of Horus ended up inside the body of Set. This was a metaphysical crisis. The seed of pure order was now trapped inside the body of pure chaos. These two opposing forces, which should annihilate each other, began to react. They swirled and combined, fusing the unyielding structure of the falcon with the wild, unpredictable power of the storm beast. From this impossible union, Thoth was born. He emerged from the forehead of Set, carrying the lunar disk. This is why Thoth is often called the silver Aten. In this retelling, Thoth is not just an idea. He is the accidental byproduct of a clash between opposing cosmic forces. He is what happens when order tries to impose itself on raw chaos. He is the bridge between the light and the dark, because he is made of both. He understands the righteousness of Horus, but he also understands the rage of Set. This is why he is the only God capable of judging them. He is the gray morality in a black and white universe. I prefer the messy version, because true wisdom isn't usually born in a vacuum of perfect thought. Wisdom is usually what you get after a terrible fight. Wisdom is the scar tissue that forms over the wound of experience. However he arrived, the moment Thoth stepped onto the primeval mound, the first island of dry earth to rise from the waters, the universe changed. While the other new gods were busy flexing their muscles, creating sunlight, separating the sky from the earth, and breathing air into the world, Thoth did something entirely unprecedented. He turned his back on the physical world and looked at the abstract. He didn't make a mountain. He didn't make a star. He made a mark. The myths say the very first thing Thoth ever wrote was the name of Ra. But he didn't just write the name, he drew a circle around it. He enclosed it in a loop of rope tied at the bottom with a knot. He created the Shen ring, which elongated became the cartouche, that familiar oval loop you see surrounding the names of pharaohs in every museum in the world. This was not a decorative choice. This was an act of war against the void. You see, out in the darkness, the great serpent Apep was waiting. Apep was the memory of the nun, the embodiment of non-existence, who wanted to swallow the sun and return the universe to the silent water. Apep wanted to erase the name of Ra. By writing Ra's name down and encircling it, Thoth performed the first act of defensive magic. He trapped the concept of the sun god in ink and stone. He severed the name from the object and gave the name a life of its own. In ancient Egypt, the concept of the wren was one of the 5 parts of the soul. They believed that to speak a thing was to give it temporary life, vibrating in the air. But to write a thing, to carve it into the imperishable rock, that was to make it immortal. Before Thoth, the universe was just happening. Events flowed like water uncaptured. After Thoth, the universe had a record. By inventing the hieroglyphs, the Medu Neter, or words of the gods, he invented the past. And in doing so, he invented the possibility of the future. This invention, however, came with a heavy price. It was the beginning of the great bureaucracy of heaven, a burden that would fall squarely on Thoth's shoulders for the rest of eternity. If you invent writing, congratulations. You have just volunteered to be the secretary for the cosmos. You have made yourself indispensable, and therefore you have ensured you will never ever be allowed to rest. We often call Thoth the god of wisdom or the god of magic. We imagine a wizard in a tower, but his actual day-to-day existence was far more grueling. He was the scribe of the Ennead, the divine council of the 9 great gods. Imagine the celestial boardroom at the dawn of time. Ra is bellowing orders that contradict themselves because he is senile and fiery. Osiris is brooding about his own mortality. Isis is scheming to steal power for her son. Set is breaking the furniture and threatening to burn the sky. And there, in the corner, is Thoth. He is sober. He is meticulous. He is holding a pallet of reed pens and a pot of water. He is writing it all down in shorthand. He is the one ensuring that when a god makes a decree, it actually happens. Without him, Ra's commands would be nothing but noise. Thoth translates the noise of the divine will into the code of reality. He is the cosmic civil servant without whom the machinery of the universe grinds to a halt. But his job wasn't just taking minutes. He quickly realized that the universe he had helped catalog was broken. The mechanics of creation were faulty. In the earliest days, the year was only 360 days long. It was a perfect circle, mirroring the 360 degrees of the sun's path. But this perfection was sterile. The sky goddess Nut had fallen in love with the earth god Geb. They were locked in a tight embrace, leaving no room for air or life. Ra, jealous and fearful of their union, separated them and cursed Nut. He decreed that she could not give birth on any day of the year. On no day of the 360 days shall you bear children, Ra commanded. It was an unbreakable curse. It meant the end of the divine bloodline. It meant Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys could never be born. The cosmos was doomed to stagnation. Thoth, the ultimate lawyer, the master of the loophole, heard this decree. He couldn't break Ra's command. That would be treason, and it would break the laws of Ma'at. But he could circumvent it. He realized the calendar was drifting. The solar year and the lunar year were not in sync. He went to Khonsu, the ancient moon god, a deity of gambling and light. Thoth challenged Khonsu to a game of Senet, a board game of strategy and chance that represented the passage of the soul. The stakes were high. Thoth wagered his wisdom. Khonsu wagered his light. They played for hours, perhaps years. Thoth, the inventor of calculation, could not lose. He won hand after hand, game after game. He won so much light from the moon that the moon was forced to wane, creating the lunar cycle we see today. Thoth took this stolen moonlight and forged it into time. He didn't make seconds or minutes. He created days. He gathered enough light to create 5 distinct days. But here is the genius of Thoth. He didn't add these days into the year. He tacked them onto the end of it. These were the epagomenal days, the days upon the year. Because these 5 days existed outside the official 360-day calendar of Ra, Ra's curse did not apply to them. They were loopholes in time. On the first day, Osiris was born. On the second, Horus the elder. On the third, Set tore himself from the womb. On the fourth, Isis. On the fifth, Nephthys. Thoth didn't just measure time. He literally stole time to allow life to exist. He created a pocket of reality where the oppressive laws of the supreme authority did not apply. This acts as the fundamental blueprint for his character. He serves the system, yes, but he also knows how to manipulate the system to save it from itself. He is the benevolent bureaucrat who knows which form to stamp to save your life and which form to lose to save your soul. Yet this was only the beginning of his labors. As the universe expanded, so did the complexity of keeping it running. Thoth became the great surgeon, the mathematician of the flesh. And this brings us to one of the most profound metaphors in all of human mythology, the eye of Horus. During the Great War, Set, in a fit of blinding rage, tore out the left eye of Horus. This was not just a physical injury. The left eye of Horus was the moon. It was the center of intuition, emotion, and night vision. Set didn't just pluck it out, he shattered it. He broke it into 6 distinct pieces and scattered them across the cosmos. The world went dark. Perception was fragmented. Thoth, in his form as the ibis, flew across reality to find the pieces. He found them in the mud, in the sky, in the blood of the battlefield. He brought them back to his workshop in Hermopolis. Here, myth bleeds into mathematics. The Egyptians used the parts of the eye of Horus to represent fractions in their measuring system. The right side of the eye was 1/2, the pupil was 1/4, the eyebrow was 1/8, the left side was 1/16, the curved tail was 1/32, the teardrop was 1/64. Thoth assembled the pieces. But if you are mathematically inclined, you will notice a problem. If you add 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 plus 1/32 plus 1/64, you do not get 1. You get 63/64. The eye is incomplete. There is a tiny fraction missing, a sliver of the soul that was lost in the trauma of the fight. Logic dictates the eye can never be whole again. The math does not work. But Thoth is not just a mathematician, he is a magician. The myths say Thoth used his spit, or in some versions his magic breath, to supply the missing 1/64. He forced the equation to balance. He made the incomplete whole. This is the definition of Thoth's wisdom. It is the understanding that logic alone is not enough to heal the world. Mathematics can describe the universe, but it cannot repair it. To fix a broken thing, whether it is an eye, a mind, or a heart, you need exact science plus a tiny, indefinable fraction of magic. You need the irrational to save the rationale. Thus he restored the eye, calling it the Wedjat, the whole one. He gave it back to Horus, and with this healed eye, Horus was finally able to see his father Osiris in the underworld and resurrect him. Without Thoth's calculus, there is no resurrection. If the mathematics of the eye of Horus represents Thoth's mastery over the broken logic of the daylight world, his next duty represents his mastery over the terror of the dark. We assume the sun rises every morning. We treat it as a certainty of physics. But the Egyptians viewed the sunrise not as a mechanical certainty, but as a daily military victory that had to be hard won. When the sun sets in the west, the Egyptians believed Ra died. He became a corpse, a ram-headed figure made of flesh, old and weary. He entered the mouth of the sky goddess Nut and began a terrifying journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. This was not a metaphorical journey. It was a 12-hour voyage through the intestinal tract of the cosmos. The Duat was a place of absolute darkness, populated by things that should not exist. There were lakes of fire, gates guarded by knife-wielding demons, and vast caverns of silence. And hunting the sunboat through every hour was Apep, the chaos serpent, the uncreator, whose only goal was to stop the boat, swallow the sun corpse, and end time. Most of the gods on the solar bark were terrified. The myths describe the entourage of Ra, great warrior gods shivering in the dark. Ra himself is often asleep or in a coma-like state, regenerating. But there is one god who is required to be awake, alert, and standing at the prow for the entire 12-hour shift. In the funerary texts, Thoth is often depicted standing right at the front of the boat, or sometimes just behind Ra, holding a scroll. He is the navigator. The duat is a maze. It is not just physical geography, it is a linguistic maze. Every gate has a name. Every demon has a secret name. Every stretch of water requires a password. If you do not know the words, the gate does not open and the sun dies. Thoth is the only one who knows the words. As the boat glides over the black waters of the underworld, it is Thoth's voice that cuts through the silence. He recites the spells that confuse the serpents. He speaks the true names of the gatekeepers, stripping them of their power to harm. He engages in magical debates with the monsters of the deep. This gives us a profound insight into the Egyptian definition of magic. Magic was not shooting fireballs from your hands. Magic was knowledge. It was knowing the specific piece of information that controls a specific aspect of reality. Thoth didn't fight with a sword. He fought with a dictionary. He navigated hell by categorizing it. There is a moment in the 7th hour of the night, the deepest part of the darkness, where Apep attacks. The serpent is so massive his coils swallow the horizon. His roar is the sound of earthquakes. In this moment of deafening chaos, Thoth does not scream. He writes. He calculates the trajectory of the boat. He records the defeat of the serpent before it happens, using the power of the written word to fix the future into a reality where order triumphs. He is the pilot of the night. He is the cool, rational intellect that steers the soul through its darkest emotional crises. When the rest of the universe is sleeping or dead, Thoth is the designated driver, ensuring that tomorrow happens. But if the night journey is his duty to the gods, his presence in the hall of judgment is his duty to you, the hall of two truths, the hall of Ma'at. This is the central image of Egyptian religion. It is the moment every ancient Egyptian spent their entire life preparing for. You have died. You have been mummified. Your soul has traversed the dangerous geography of the afterlife, and you finally stand before the throne of Osiris, the Lord of the dead. The room is vast, lined with 42 terrifying judges, each waiting to hear if you have committed a specific sin. In the center of the room stands a massive scale. On one side of the scale, Anubis, the jackal god, places your heart. The heart, or Ib, was seen as the seat of intelligence, emotion, and memory. It contains the record of every single thing you ever did, said, or thought. Every kindness, every theft, every lie. It is heavy with the weight of a human life. On the other side of the scale, Ma'at places a single ostrich feather, the feather of truth, the feather of cosmic order. It is a binary test. If your heart is heavy with sin, it will tip the scale. You will be fed to Ammit the Devourer, a hybrid monster with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippo, who waits hungrily beneath the balance. You will cease to exist. This is the second death, the total annihilation of the soul. But if your heart is light, if you have lived a life in accordance with balance, if you have been kind, if you have fed the hungry and clothed the naked, the scale will balance. You will be justified. You will enter the field of reeds, paradise. It is a scene of supreme tension. Osiris sits in silence. Anubis adjusts the plummet. Ammit drools. And there, standing quietly to the right of the scales, is Thoth. He holds his palette and his reed brush. He is looking at the needle of the balance. He is not the judge. He does not decide if you were good or bad. He does not plead your case. He does not prosecute you. He records. The heart of the deceased has been weighed, Thoth announces to the room. It has not been found light. It has not been found heavy. It is true of voice. He writes the result on his scroll. This roll is terrifying in its objectivity. Thoth is the embodiment of the cold, hard fact. He represents the idea that the universe is not swayed by your excuses. You cannot bribe Thoth. You cannot charm him. You cannot lie to him because he wrote the definition of truth. He simply looks at what you are and he writes it down. However, there is a layer of mercy hidden in his function. In many spells of the Book of the Dead, the deceased person actually pleads with Thoth. They ask him to make their heart steady. They ask him to silence the heart so it doesn't blurt out their sins. Thoth, as the inventor of writing, has the power to edit. There is a subtle implication in the theology that Thoth, through his magic, helps the deceased navigate the trial. He provides the correct words to speak to the 42 judges. He essentially serves as the court-appointed defense attorney who coaches the client on what to say to avoid annihilation. He wants the system to work. He wants the balance to be maintained. He wants you to pass, provided you are not truly evil. He is the keeper of the balance, but he is forbidden from ever touching the scales. He is the God who knows exactly what you are, and he says absolutely nothing about it other than writing it down. The Egyptian pantheon is a zoo of majestic creatures. We have the falcon of Horus, the predator of the high skies. We have the lioness of Sekhmet, the hunter of the plains. We have the jackal of Anubis, the scavenger of the necropolis. These are animals of power, strength, and fear. And then there is Thoth, a man with the head of an ibis. The African sacred ibis is not a noble bird in the traditional sense. It is a wading bird. It is gangly, with spindly black legs and a body of white feathers, and a naked black scaly neck and head. It spends its life ankle deep in the mud of the Nile Delta. Why, of all the creatures in Africa, did the high priest choose this awkward bird to represent the supreme, transcendent mind of God? You have to watch how an ibis eats to understand the Egyptian genius. The ibis does not hunt with its eyes, it hunts with its beak. Its beak is long, curved, and sensitive. It walks through the murky, opaque waters of the Nile, waters where you cannot see the bottom. It dips that long, curved beak into the silt and the filth. It probes. It feels around in the darkness, distinguishing between a stone, a piece of wood, and a snail. When it finds the snail, the food, the sustenance, the truth, it pulls it out of the mud and swallows it. This is the perfect metaphor for the scribe. Wisdom, the Egyptians were saying, is not about soaring in the blue sky like a falcon, looking down on the world from a distance. That is vision. But Thoth is not the god of vision. He is the god of wisdom. True wisdom is the ability to wade into the muddy, murky, chaotic mess of daily life, the politics, the arguments, the confusion, and use your tool to probe through the filth until you find the one hard, solid fact. The ibis is the researcher. The ibis is the distinct separator of truth from noise. Furthermore, the ibis was known to migrate. It appeared with the rising of the Nile floodwaters. The Egyptians associated it with the return of life and the cycles of time. It knew things the farmers didn't. It knew when the water was coming. But Thoth has another face. If you visit the ruins of Hermopolis, you will see massive statues of baboons. This seems even stranger. The Hamadryas baboon is not a calm animal. It is aggressive, loud, sexually hyperactive, and chaotic. It seems like a creature of Set, not Thoth. But the Egyptians were master observers of nature. They noticed a specific behavior in these baboons. Just before dawn, in the gray moments before the sunrise, the baboons would wake up. They would sit together facing east, perfectly still. And the moment the first sliver of the sun disk broke the horizon, the baboons would begin to chatter and shriek excitedly, raising their hands. To a modern biologist, this is just the animals warming up and establishing territory, but to an ancient Egyptian priest, this was clearly a religious ritual. The baboons were the first creatures on earth to acknowledge the divinity of Ra. They were the adorers of the sun. They were holding a morning prayer meeting. Thus, the baboon became the symbol of the result of wisdom. If the ibis represents the active mind, the searching, the writing, the calculating, the probing, the baboon represents the static mind, the mind that knows, the mind that sits in heavy, silent contemplation of the divine. Thoth, as the baboon, is often called Aston. In this form, he sits squat on his haunches, his paws on his knees, his penis exposed, often with the lunar disk balanced on his head. He is the heavy weight of knowledge. He is the librarian who has read every book and is now just sitting there, watching you, knowing that you haven't read any of them. The duality is perfect, the bird of the water and the beast of the land, the searcher and the knower, the agile scribe and the heavy judge. His tools, too, are laden with meaning. He is almost never shown without the scribe's palette. This was a rectangular piece of wood with a slot for holding reed pens and two circular depressions for ink. One cake of ink was black, the other was red. Black was for the main text, the mundane reality, the is. Red was for the rubrics. Red was used for headings, for the starts of new chapters, for the names of dangerous spirits, for the names of enemies. Thoth is the master of both inks. He knows the daily reality and the dangerous, potent magic. He knows when to speak plainly and when to speak in code. And finally, consider his color. If you walk through the Valley of the Kings, you will see gods painted in brilliant colors. Amun is blue, Osiris is green, Ra is golden. Thoth is almost strictly monochrome. He is painted with the flat black of ink or the white of the linen wrap, or a pale shimmering blue-silver representing moonlight. He is not meant to draw the eye. He is the shadow that defines the light. There is a secret in the art of the pharaohs. Look closely at the coronation scenes. The pharaoh is center stage, bathed in glory, receiving the crowns from the great gods. But look behind the throne. Look in the negative space. In almost every single coronation scene spanning 3,000 years, Thoth is there. He is standing just behind the action or off to the side. He is holding a long palm rib, the symbol of years. He is not crowning the king. He is writing down how long the king will reign. This is the ultimate statement of power. The king may wear the crown, but the king does not decide how long he keeps it. Thoth decides. He is the divine notary. The coronation is not legal until the scribe has stamped it. He is the God who is in every room, but is never the center of attention. He is the wallpaper of the universe, essential for holding it together, but designed to be ignored. He is the silence between the notes that makes the music possible. When you know everything, you quickly learn that most things are sad. To be the God of wisdom is not a gift. It is a burden. If you look closely at the mythology of Thoth, you will not find a collection of triumphant adventures or conquests. You will not find him slaying dragons or siring dynasties. Instead, you will find a chronicle of 4 great tragedies that define his eternal existence. These tragedies reveal the terrible price of being the one who remembers. The first tragedy, the curse of absolute neutrality. The first tragedy is the curse of neutrality. It is the terrible silence of the judge who knows the truth but is forbidden from speaking it until the paperwork is done. This tragedy played out during the most turbulent period in Egyptian myth history, the contendings of Horus and Set. After the good king Osiris was murdered by his jealous brother Set, the throne of Egypt was usurped. Set, the god of chaos, storms, and violence, ruled with an iron fist. But Osiris had a son, the falcon-headed Horus, who was raised in secret in the marshes of the Delta. When Horus came of age, he challenged his uncle for the throne. It should have been a simple case. Set was a murderer and a usurper. Horus was the rightful heir by blood and law. But Set was powerful, charming, and dangerous. He turned the challenge into a lawsuit that dragged on for 80 years. 80 years of civil war. 80 years of arguments. 80 years of the gods screaming at each other in the divine tribunal. And through all 80 years, Thoth had to sit there and take notes. Think about the psychological torture of that position. Thoth is the God of truth. He is the possessor of all knowledge. He knew on day one that Set was lying. He knew when Set cheated in the contest. He knew that the arguments Set made, claiming that strength makes right, were legally void under the laws of Ma'at. Thoth could have ended the entire conflict with a single sentence. He could have opened his record book, stood up and said, "Set is lying. Here is the proof. Horus is king. Case closed." But he didn't. He couldn't. His role as the cosmic scribe meant he had to uphold the process of law, even when the process was obviously broken. If the scribe interferes with the record becomes worthless. If the judge puts his thumb on the scale loses its meaning. Thoth understood a terrifying reality. The integrity of the institution is more important than the immediate result of a single case. He had to sacrifice immediate justice for the sake of eternal order. There is a heartbreaking moment in one version of the myths where the goddess Isis, the mother of Horus, screams at Thoth. She is exhausted, furious, and terrified for her son, who has been beaten, blinded, and humiliated by Set. She turns to the silent ibis-headed god and yells, essentially, "You know the truth. You have the power to end this war with one word. Why don't you speak?" The canonical texts don't give his reply much emotional weight, but the implication of his silence is devastating. It is the burden of the historian who watches a mistake being repeated, but cannot step onto the stage to stop it. Thoth's unspoken answer is the terrible realization of wisdom. A sentence that ends a war today may end the world tomorrow. If he breaks the rules now to help the good guy, he sets a precedent that rules don't matter. And in a universe held together by rules, that leads to the return of the none, total chaos. So he watches, he writes, he records the lies of Set with the same meticulous calligraphy as the truths of Horus. He lets the gods tear each other apart for 8 decades, carrying the crushing weight of the solution in his pocket, waiting for the exact, legally perfect moment to reveal it. The second tragedy, the Book of Thoth, and the destruction of the reader. The second tragedy is perhaps the most famous and certainly the most human. It is the tragedy of forbidden knowledge. It is the story of the Book of Thoth. This story, known from the demotic papyri of the Ptolemaic period, reads like a horror story about the dangers of the intellect. The legends say that Thoth wrote a specific book with his own hand. It was not a long book. It contained only 2 spells, but these were the ultimate spells of the cosmos. The first spell allowed you to enchant the sky, the earth, the underworld, the mountains, and the seas. It allowed you to understand the language of all animals, every bird in the air, every serpent in the sand, every fish in the deep. It was the spell of total connection to the physical world. The second spell was even more dangerous. It allowed you to see the gods themselves in their true forms. It allowed you to see the sun god Ra, not as a distant disk, but as he truly is, accompanied by the Ennead. It allowed you to command the movement of the stars and the cycles of the moon. It was the spell of total connection to the divine world. Thoth knew this book was radioactive. It contained too much gravity for a mortal mind to hold. He didn't put it in a library. He didn't give it to the priests. He buried it. He placed the book inside a box of gold. He placed the gold box inside a box of silver, the silver inside a box of ivory and ebony, the ivory inside a box of bronze, the bronze inside a box of copper, the copper inside a box of iron. He threw this nesting doll of heavy metals into the bottom of the Nile, near the city of Koptos, and around the box he coiled a deathless serpent, a creature that could not be killed, to guard it for eternity. But secrets do not stay buried. A human prince named Neferkaptah, a man of royal blood and insatiable curiosity, heard the legend. Neferkaptah was the archetype of the obsessive scholar. He didn't care about ruling. He only cared about knowing. Driven by the human need to know what we are not meant to know, he used powerful magic to locate the tomb of the book. He sailed to Koptos. He went to the river. He used his magic to part the waters. He faced the deathless serpent. Neferkaptah fought the snake. He cut it in half, but the two halves snapped back together and the snake lived. He cut it again, and sand filled the wound, and the snake lived. Finally, Neferkaptah cut the snake and placed sand between the two severed parts so they could not touch. The creature died. He opened the iron box, the copper, the bronze, the ivory, the silver, the gold. He held the book of Thoth in his mortal hands. He read the first spell. Suddenly the world exploded with sound. The silence of the river vanished. He could hear the fish discussing the currents. He could hear the birds gossiping in the reeds. He understood the molecular vibration of the universe. He read the second spell. The roof of the sky seemed to dissolve. He saw Ra. He saw the rotation of the planets. He saw the machinery of the cosmos. For a moment, Prince Neferkaptah was not a man. He was a god. He returned to his boat drunk on omniscience. He taught the spells to his wife, Awere, and she, too, saw the glory of the world. They were happier than any humans had ever been, but Thoth found out immediately. You cannot steal light from the sun without the keeper of accounts noticing. The universe was out of balance. A mortal was holding the source code. Thoth went to Ra. He did not yell. He simply stated the fact. A human has taken my book. Ra's judgment was swift, silent, and terrible. He sent a divine decree from the sky. As Neferkaptah sailed home in triumph clutching the book, his young son Merib walked out onto the deck of the boat. A mysterious force, the curse of Thoth, pushed him. He fell into the Nile and drowned. Neferkaptah used the book's magic to retrieve the body, but he could not bring the boy back to life. He buried his son. They continued sailing. A few days later, his wife, Awere, fell into the river and drowned. Neferkaptah was left alone on the boat. He held the book that gave him all knowledge, but it had cost him everything he loved. He realized the catastrophic price of his ambition. He understood finally why Thoth had buried it. In a fit of grief, Neferkaptah tied the book to his chest. He threw himself into the Nile, drowning himself, taking the accursed knowledge back to the water and the silence from which it came. The tragedy here is not that Thoth punished him. The tragedy is that the story repeats itself. Centuries later in the timeline of the myth, another prince named Setnekamwas, a son of Ramses the Great, finds the tomb of Neferkaptah. Setne is a great magician, and he wants the book. He breaks into the tomb. He sees the ghost of Neferkaptah and the ghost of his wife, Awere. The ghost of the wife tells Setne the entire sad story I just told you. She begs him, "Do not take this book. It destroyed us. It will destroy you." Setne listens to the story of the destruction of a family, and he ignores it. He thinks, "I am smarter. I can handle it." He steals the book from the hands of the corpse. Setni, too, is tormented. He is nearly destroyed by hallucinations and guilt until he crawls back to the tomb, returns the book, and seals the crypt forever. The lesson of the book of Thoth is bitter. Thoth didn't hide the book because he was jealous of mortals. He hid it to protect the universe from mortals who understand it. He knows that human beings cannot hold ultimate power without immediately destroying the things they love most. He is the librarian who has to keep the best books locked away because the readers are too irresponsible to handle them. He is the guardian of the barrier between human and divine, a barrier we try to cross at our own peril. The third tragedy is physical. It is the tragedy of the invisible God. If you go to Egypt today, or if you look at the great reconstructions of the past, you see Karnak, the temple of Amun-Ra. It is a forest of stone, 134 massive columns in just one hall. Millions of tons of granite and sandstone moved over centuries to glorify the king of the gods. It is impossible to ignore. It screams power. Now look for Thoth. The city of Thoth was called Kamenu. It was once a sprawling metropolis of theology and learning. But if you visit the site today, there is almost nothing left. There are two massive broken statues of baboons sitting in the dust. There are the foundations of a basilica. There is scrub brush and sand. Why? Why did the god of architecture leave no great monument? The answer lies in the nature of his worship. Thoth's city wasn't built primarily of stone. It was a city of libraries. It was built of mud brick, the material of the home and the archive, and filled with papyrus scrolls. Stone lasts, paper burns, mud dissolves back into the Nile. There's a brutal irony here. Thoth is the god of records. He is the god who ensures that nothing is forgotten. He invented the hieroglyphs so that the names of pharaohs would last forever. Yet his own physical legacy on earth has been almost entirely erased by time. A Greek visitor to Hermopolis around 300 BCE wrote something profoundly sad. He said approximately, "They tell me the great God of wisdom lives in this city. I have looked everywhere for his glorious temple, but all I see are endless rooms of hunched scribes copying tax records and land deeds." His worship wasn't glorious festivals with dancing girls and feasts. His worship was bureaucracy. It was homework. It was the quiet, back-breaking labor of copying texts. Furthermore, consider the scribes who built Karnak. Every hieroglyph praising Amun-Ra, every relief carving of Osiris, every hymn to Isis, they were all written, designed, and carved by men who considered themselves priests of Thoth. They used Thoth's gifts, writing, art, measurement, to glorify everyone except Thoth. He is the ghostwriter of Egyptian civilization. He wrote the speeches for the stars. He designed the stages for the kings. He drafted the laws for the judges, and no one ever read the credits. He is the infrastructure that makes glory possible, while remaining unglamorous himself. The fourth tragedy, eternal loneliness between all worlds. And finally, the tragedy of the god himself, the tragedy of isolation. Thoth is the ultimate loner of the Egyptian pantheon. Look at the family trees of the gods. They are messy and interconnected. Osiris and Isis are husband and wife, bound by a love so strong it conquered death. Geb and Nut are the earth and sky, locked in eternal longing. Horus has his mother. Set has his wives. Thoth stands apart. He has no real family. He wasn't born of a mother and father in the traditional sense. He sprang from a headache or conflict. He has no children who inherit his kingdom. In some traditions, he is loosely paired with Ma'at, the goddess of truth, as a sort of professional counterpart. In others, he is linked with Seshat, the goddess of writing. But these aren't passionate love affairs. These are functional partnerships. They are colleagues. They work in the same office. He is never seen feasting. He is never seen drunk. He is never seen celebrating. His domain is the liminal space, the space in between things. He is the god of the moon, an object that changes shape every night, never constant. He is the god of dawn and dusk, the times that are neither fully day nor fully night. He is depicted as an ibis, a bird that lives on the shoreline, neither fully on land nor fully in the water. He stands between the living and the dead in the judgment hall. He stands between the gods and the demons in the night bark. He belongs everywhere, and therefore he belongs nowhere. If you spend eternity observing everyone else, you never participate yourself. He is the eternal wallflower at the dance of creation. He knows the exact weight of every heart that has ever beaten, but we have no record of the weight of his own. To be the God of supreme wisdom is to be profoundly, utterly alone. Because to understand everyone is to be separate from everyone. He is loved by no one specifically, because his job requires him to care equally for everyone objectively. He is the only God who stays awake through the long night, keeping the watch, ensuring the sun rises, knowing that when the world wakes up to the warmth of the light, they will thank Ra, not him. And he accepts this, because that is what wisdom does. It does the work, not for the applause, but because the work is necessary. If you have been following this journey through the dark corridors of Egyptian mythology, you are now familiar with the great cycles. You know the tragedy of Osiris, the murdered king who became the Lord of the dead. You know the tenacity of Isis, the magician mother who fought the world to save her son. You know the chaotic rage of Seth and the imperial majesty of Ra. You probably thought those were separate stories. You likely viewed them as distinct chapters in a compiled anthology of myths. They are not. They are all chapters in a single book that Thoth is writing. If you step back from the colorful murals and look at the structure of the mythology itself, you will begin to see the silver thread of the ibis woven through every single narrative. Thoth is not just a character in the play. He is the stage manager. He is the operating system upon which the entire software of the Egyptian cosmos runs. Consider the death of Osiris. When the king was murdered and chopped into 14 pieces, it was Isis who traveled the world to find them. But when she found them, she was faced with a pile of dead meat. How did she know the spells to reassemble him? How did she know the specific intonations required to knit divine flesh back together and conceive a child with a corpse? She knew because Thoth taught her. He was the teacher in the shadows. He provided the technical manual for resurrection. Consider the flight of Isis. When she was hiding in the marshes of the delta, protecting the infant Horus from the wrath of Set, she was stung by a scorpion. Or rather, in some versions, her son was stung. The poison was coursing through the veins of the last hope of the universe. Isis screamed to the heavens. She stopped the solar bark in the middle of the sky. Who came down to answer her? Not Ra, not Osiris. It was Thoth. He descended from the boat of millions of years, stopped the progression of time itself, and recited the spell that drew the poison out of the child's body. He literally paused the universe to save a single life because he knew that life was the pivot point of history. Consider the daily death of Ra. When the sun god enters the underworld, he is vulnerable. He is old. Why are we so sure he will rise tomorrow as a vigorous youth? Because Thoth knows the precise words to speak in the 12th hour of the night to trigger the metamorphosis. He is the midwife of the sun. Without Thoth, Osiris stays dead. Isis is just a grieving widow with no magic. Horus dies of scorpion venom in a swamp. Seth rules forever. And Ra never wakes up from his nightly coma. Thoth is the indispensable mechanism. We have spent hours looking at the colorful icons on the screen, the heroes and the villains, never noticing the code running underneath it all. He is the intelligence that allows the universe to function as a coherent story rather than a series of random violent events. But the most profound role of Thoth is not found in the beginning of the story or the middle. It is found at the very end. Eschatology is the study of the end of the world. We don't often talk about Egyptian eschatology. We assume their religion was obsessed with eternal life, so we assume they thought the world would last forever. They did not. The ancient Egyptians were realists. They saw that the Nile rose and fell. They saw that the sun rose and set. They understood that anything that has a beginning must, by definition, have an ending. There is a chilling passage in the Book of the Dead, specifically chapter 175. It records a dialogue between Adam, the creator god, and Thoth. The deceased soul asks, "How long have I to live?" And Atum replies with a prophecy of the ultimate end. He says that one day, after millions of years have passed, he will grow tired of existence. He will destroy everything he has made. The earth, the sky, the gods, the demons, the humans, the temples, all of it will be unmade. I will destroy all that I have created, Atum says. The earth shall return to the none, to the floodwaters, as in its beginning. The universe will revert to the silence of the primordial ocean. The screaming of the Ogdoad will stop. The recording of history will cease. But Atum adds a caveat. He says that when the waters rise and swallow the world, two beings will survive. I shall remain, Atum said, together with Osiris. In this final state, they will transform into serpents, creatures of survival and regeneration, swimming through the dark waters of the void, resting until a new universe is ready to be born. But notice the implication. If Atum and Osiris are the only ones left, who is listening to this prophecy? Who is recording this conversation in chapter 175? It is Thoth. Logic dictates that for the book to be closed, someone must close it. Thoth is the witness to the end of time. He is the consciousness that will watch the stars go out one by one. He will watch the pyramids crumble into sand and the sand dissolve into water. He will watch the last human take the last breath. And when the final light is extinguished, Thoth will be there to write the final entry in the cosmic ledger. Project Earth completed. He is the executor of the divine will. He enters the void last, carrying the memory of everything that ever was. He is the hard drive of the universe, preserving the data of our existence even after the hardware of the world has been destroyed. Now, I want you to imagine that moment. We have spent this time together talking about myths, history, and theology, but words are just noises we make to distract ourselves from the silence. Thoth is, above all, a creature of silence. Imagine the desert at night, not the desert of the tourists, but the deep, high desert where the wind sounds like a flute made of bone. Imagine the sound of a reed pen scratching against papyrus, scritch, scratch.